Welcome back to this tryptophan-laden edition of Freedom and Prosperity Radio. Walks around at least the living room during the breaks is handy to burn off the Thanksgiving dinner, if you're still allowed to say Thanksgiving in your household. Joining us next, senior visiting fellow with the Thomas Jefferson Institute is Vincent Vernuccio. Vincent has done some research into what has happened to Virginia's workplace freedom. We have dropped, by the way, prodigiously. I mean, it's almost as bad as our education scores have. Vincent, welcome back to the program. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, and thank you for having me on.
Not at all, and thank you, I say, because I know that when you're given bad news, it's usually at that point where you can do something about it. At least that's why we used to test our students, not so much so we could get federal money, but to find out if they were falling behind before they fell too far behind. Maybe we can get back to that. But in this case, you've looked into worker freedom, and we used to be an A-plus state, not so much anymore, Vincent?
We did. Unfortunately, the Commonwealth in Virginia, we have dropped the worst in the country, according to the Commonwealth Foundation's grading state public sector labor laws. And we went from an A-plus ranking in 2019, and now, unfortunately, we're at a C. And a lot of that came from a law that went into effect last year in 2021 that basically allowed for freewheeling, no-holds-barred public sector bargaining at the town, county, or school district level. And, we're unfortunately already starting to see the results of that. And the Commonwealth Foundation, in their great study, they took note, and that's the reason for, this pretty dismal drop, worst in the country.
Now, I'm going to take the devil's advocate position. Is this because they wanted to have their cake and eat it too, and wrote a law that basically circumvented right to work, and though permitting collective bargaining doesn't necessarily abdicate the right to work status of our state, and creating sort of this trying to have it both ways set of rules?
Well, thankfully in Virginia, and this is why we're at a C and not something worse, Virginia still is a right-to-work state. And just backing up, let's talk about what right-to-work is. Right to work simply means that a union can't get a worker fired for not paying them. And now right to work really only applies to workers in the private sector, because there was this Supreme Court case a couple years back called Janus versus AFSCME that said that everything that government unions do, and we're talking about public sector bargaining here, everything that government unions do is inherently political. And because it's political, public employees have a First Amendment right to pay. So public employees across the country have right to work. Here in Virginia, the private sector employees, they're protected with public sector as well by Virginia's right to work law. And, thankfully, that is one of the things that we still have going for us here in Virginia.
So, and we're watching some of these discussions take place in places as dysfunctional municipally as Charlottesville, where it's been made, the case has been made in the local media that must have been what was wrong with Charlottesville. It wasn't the dysfunction of the city government and the elected officials. We needed to add collective bargaining agreements and these labor unions in. That will make it all better. With tongue out of cheek, Vincent, where have some of these already taken hold, and what has been some of the after effects of some of these collective bargaining agreements?
It's mostly in the northern Virginia suburbs of D.C., city of Alexandria, county of Alexandria, Fairfax, Arlington. I know Prince William is looking into it. And now here's where Virginia gets a little weird, if you will, and is unlike most other places. The law that was passed simply lifted the ban Virginia had on public sector bargaining and said that localities would be able to allow it if they wanted to, if they passed an ordinance. They also said that, public employees could basically muscle them or pressure them into doing it if they get a majority of the public employees to sign a petition. But the thing was that, unlike most other states, there was no guardrails. There was nothing to say, okay, you can't negotiate over emergency services, or you can't put limitations on what that union can negotiate for. So we've seen some pretty far-reaching ordinances at the local level that are giving unions a lot of privileges that, they may not have in other areas.
Now, I grew up in the 70s in New York City, and if you've ever seen the movie Joker, where they depict Gotham City as the city just crippled by municipal union strikes, and there's garbage piled up a story and a half on the side of the streets, that's not an exaggeration to what Manhattan was like during the good old days of Fort Apache, the Bronx. It's where the phrase blue flu came from, because laws got put in saying police officers can't strike, firefighters can't strike against the city in their collective bargaining. But that blind spot is a frightening one, Vincent, if all of a sudden we don't have provisions saying that a police union, per se, in Virginia couldn't just stage a walkout.
Well, and then it's the definition on walkout. Virginia does have anti-striking laws. They also have a secret ballot protection act, so saying that unions can't organize basically via petition or card check, but already we're seeing localities trying to give unions the ability to get around that through provisions saying, well, if the locality and the union agrees, they can have electronic voting, or basically allow the unions to go with an iPad saying, hey, sign here for the union, or vote for the union, or mail-in voting. We also saw in the Richmond School District, they had the election. It was, mostly after school or on a Saturday. And let me tell you, the union won with a majority of votes, but so few of teachers that actually voted in the election. There were more teachers that left the Richmond School District that actually voted for the union.
Wow.
But now the union has a monopoly, and it can negotiate on behalf of all of those teachers. So, we're seeing stuff like that. If you want to talk about emergencies, Fairfax wanted to exclude emergencies from bargaining, or give emergency authority to the county supervisors. And, the union said, no, you can't do that. And they pushed back. And, those safeguards were actually taken out. And, we're seeing those type of ordinances being repeated or proposed around the state.
Now, you mentioned education, and we're visiting with Vincent Vernuccio, a visiting fellow with the Thomas Jefferson Institute, going into these scorecards. The Commonwealth Foundation's research, Virginia has dropped from an A+ rating for worker freedom to C. And you mentioned the schools, the teachers' unions, and the teachers would rather switch than fight in these cases. Is that because teachers are realizing that after decades of nationwide teachers unions and the AFT, the teachers' lots in life have not improved, and that just collective bargaining is not going to make their position any better? As a matter of fact, a lot of them have discovered it's made it worse.
Well, I see, that's what we'd like to see in a lot of these ordinances, is have that protection. Don't allow a small minority of union supporters say, well, no, we're going to vote for this union. We're going to have the election, off school grounds or somewhere way out in the other side of the school district where teachers probably aren't going to be able to get to vote or go take a Saturday. But then if that small minority of union supporters vote for the union and they get a majority of the votes in the election that really hasn't seen a huge upswell of teachers throughout the district, they get that majority, then they get that monopoly. So, at a minimum, you should have, a quorum, or make it so that it's much easier for those teachers or those public employees to have a say. And more than that, make it so that, they have a regular say, just like we vote for governor, state legislator, president. These public employees should have the right to recertify or vote periodically on their unions and not be, stuck with a union cord as an heirloom like we see in multiple other states where it could be generations before these public employees have the ability to have a say of, yes, keep this union or remove them.
Well, there's an entire school in New York City that doesn't have a single student, but it's full of teachers and administrators who can't be removed from their positions because of the union, yet are at that point where the schools say we can't have you in the classroom anymore. And it's a frightening scenario where that happens, especially when our kids are involved. It's just as an abstract, and I know it's not in your wheelhouse per se in this affair, what would something like this do to the growing campaign that we're behind here in a lot at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy as co-signatories of this Virginia Education Opportunity Alliance? There's collective bargaining in our public schools. How can that impact school choice, or do you think it might have an impact on school choice? Money follows the child kind of school choice, Vincent.
Well, the bottom line is the teachers' unions, hands down, are the biggest force opposing school choice in the country. You see some of their agenda and some of the issues that they push. And frankly, I think a lot of that does not comport with Virginia values or most parent values across the country. But they are powerful. And they are a very strong lobby. They have a lot of political muscle. It may not, the union leadership's political views may not be shared by the rank and file. Sure. But unfortunately, they do very strongly oppose school choice and are for, several issues that many parents may disagree with.
So what can be done, once this starts? I imagine the genie can't be put back into the bottle. You can't take away somebody's right to organize a union. But let's say the General Assembly can get more conservative heads in there in 2025 or the beginning of 2025. What can be done to win back this esteemed place we used to have?
Well, there's nothing preventing the General Assembly from repealing the law that went into effect in 2021 and saying that, Virginia public sector bargaining is illegal and that, public employees are still able to work directly with their employers, but there's not this rubric or mandate of public sector bargaining. Absent that, things like union recertification, having the union stand for election, this is less about the localities themselves. This is more about protecting workers' rights, protecting public employees, making sure that they have that annual or biannual say in the union, making sure they know about their rights. Like we were talking about, that Janus versus AFSCME decision that says that public employees across the country don't have to pay the union. And that dovetails on Virginia's Right to Works law. So make sure that those public employees are informed by their employer of those rights. And after that, then we can start talking about making sure that these collective bargaining agreements don't impinge on emergency services, that, we are limiting them to more narrow subjects that aren't going to impinge even regular services. The things like the federal government doesn't even negotiate over wages. That could be an example. In Wisconsin, they limit bargaining to actually, on the opposite end, wages only, but even that's limited to inflation. So there are a lot of good examples out there. At Thomas Jefferson Institute, we put forth a toolkit with all of these ideas. So I'd be happy to share with you that toolkit for your listeners. And I would encourage them to go to the Thomas Jefferson Institute's website and check that out. And there are a lot of things both at the state and local level that can be done.
It also takes courageous elected officers, or erstwhile ones, and we're getting into 2023, and hopefully that becomes a campaign issue, because when you talk about workplace freedom, Vincent, the basic abstract is the core of what American exceptionalism was built on, correct? I mean, the idea that you choose who you want to work for because of the way they treat you, not just have it, set in some sort of arbitrary contract that may limit your potential because you're told this is your spot as per the collective bargaining agreement.
And that is the main problem with collective bargaining, is that one size fits all, one contract applies to all of the employees under that contract, and there is no individualization. There is no ability to say, hey, I want less pay for more vacation, or the opposite, less vacation for more pay. I want to be rewarded for how hard I work, not simply a seniority system where the only way I could get a raise is by logging another year on the job. That's pretty much par for the course with most union collective bargaining agreements. So that is probably one of the biggest problems, especially for workers, when it comes to these collective bargaining agreements.
When we look at, and you talk about Virginia's prodigious nosedive is one of the largest in the nation, Vincent, there have got to be worse states than we are, especially in the Northeast.
Well, that's right. Especially, Virginia still got points for right to work. We got points for having a Secret Ballot Protection Act, even though you're seeing some of those local ordinances skirting away at the edges of that law. But that's why Virginia is a C. There are worse rankings, such as New York, New Jersey. Probably the worst in the country after the last election is now Illinois, that essentially put collective bargaining in their constitution. So now even the state legislature in Illinois can't do anything counter to what a union collective bargaining agreement comes down to. So it's going to have devastating effects on that state. So we dropped considerably, but we are still better than some.
When you look at the agenda, and it is the economic version of tribalism, where if you're a teacher, you're the same as all the other teachers, and you're guilty of all the same things that other teachers are, and you're celebrated from all the same things as other teachers are. What is the sales pitch to that? Especially when you look at a world where school teachers continually at labor time come out and say, we're underpaid. And I say to them, well, then why are you yelling at us? Why don't you talk to your union who's doing these contract negotiations?
Well, that's why you're seeing even in the Richmond School District, where when they certified, it was only a very small percentage that voted for the union for the overall employees or the teachers in the Richmond School District. Now, there was a majority of votes because there was very low turnout. But overall, you're not seeing this ground well of support. In fact, I remember over the summer when Loudoun County was even looking at this, one of the union partisan supervisors, actually the chair of the county supervisors, even scolded the union, saying that they weren't doing enough to communicate with employees. So at the end of the day, what this is really about is a political agenda, and unions coming in and trying to organize, as opposed to workers rising up and saying, we need unions to come in here. It is very much more top-down than a grassroots effort of public employees across the state saying, come in and help us.
Yeah, it's the power play that always seems to be there, and it doesn't serve the rhetoric that they say. Vincent Vernuccio, visiting fellow with the Thomas Jefferson Institute. Last couple of moments, what else are you guys working on as we head to the culmination of 2022 and head into 2023?
Well, we had a poll from the beginning of the year that we just put out that showed, and I know you're going to be shocked by this, but a lot of the things that we were talking about as far as employees knowing about their rights, increasing transparency in negotiations and collective bargaining, all of that was with this Thomas Jefferson study that was conducted by Mason-Dixon, polls that usually 2/3 in support, even among, and polls very highly, even among union members. So that is just one more thing on the Thomas Jefferson Institute's website, along with the toolkit and this article. And that's all available at thomasjeffersoninst.org. thomasjeffersoninst.org.
And please support them in their efforts in this, because that is, and I don't mean to overblow it, but when we watch, economically speaking, the job market shrivel up, and elected officials promote some new mixed use development where minimum wage retail stores are going to be under $200,000 or $300,000 condominiums. You stop and you say, well, hold up, what about our job market? And it's not just restricting the number of companies, allowing companies to merge and merge and merge again until you have really one or two choices of places to work, but it's also our labor laws. Our labor laws need to be carefully looked at to make sure that they're competitive as well. And certainly in a world where you watch countries like China, whose idea of labor law is, well, we're the law and we say you have to go labor. We can do better than that, can't we, Vincent?
We can and we should. And
we did.
That is the power of right to work, and that was the power of Virginia's public sector collective bargaining stance before 2021 and before the law was passed in 2020. And I am sure that we can put safeguards back in, protect public employees, taxpayers, and voters.
Well, I appreciate your time this Thanksgiving week. I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving and heading on into Christmas in this broadcast bastion of places being able to still say that, and please make sure you're available because I know that as 2023 gets closer, we'll have some primaries. I know there are, with these new Senate and House districts, there are places where even incumbents are going back to back against each other. And then there are whole new districts with new representatives coming out of the woodwork. So we need to make sure that the voters are keen to the questions that need to be asked of these folks when it comes to workplace freedom and defending that in Virginia and getting that part of it right. So we appreciate everything you guys are doing there at the Thomas Jefferson Institute at thomasjeffersoninst.org. Vincent, you have a wonderful remainder of the weekend, and thank you for joining us this week.
You too, and happy Thanksgiving. Thanks for having me on.
And thank you all for tuning in each and every weekend to Freedom and Prosperity Radio and our efforts of the Virginia Education Opportunity Alliance and our work with voter integrity as well with Hans von Spakovsky, who was on last week's program. All this happens with your support. I know Giving Tuesday is coming up this week, and I know every other nonprofit out there is out there saying, please consider us on Giving Tuesday. And I just want you to understand that we do quite a bit, and we are perhaps some of the best managers of money out there, and we get a lot of bang for a very little buck, but there are bucks needed. So as we go into this holiday season, and Giving Tuesday is coming up, whether you like that holiday acclamation to a day of the week, that doesn't matter. But think about the Virginia Institute for Public Policy. You can take a look at what we do. Listen to previous programs of Freedom and Prosperity Radio. Read our white papers on different issues. Look at some of the things we've actually accomplished in terms of legislation that has been written and passed and is now law of the Commonwealth of Virginia, thanks to the work here at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy. So enjoy the remainder of this Thanksgiving weekend. We give thanks for you tuning in and being involved with the Tuesday Morning Group Coalition and so much of our efforts here at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy. Until next weekend, for all of us here, my name is Joe Thomas. So long, and thanks for all the fish.